दुश्मन को जुल्म के बरछे से
1974 is a significant turning point in the history of the Ahmadiyya sect of Islam. It was then that a democratically elected leader of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan declared Ahmadis non-Muslims. It was an event of its own kind in history of not only Pakistan, but history of the world at large. The anti-Ahmadiyya agitation of 1953 and the decision of the National Assembly in 1974 left Ahmadis prone to general hatred from the society. Once the Constitution of Pakistan declared Ahmadis non-Muslims, its opponents turned even more violent and aggressive. This made the persecution of Ahmadis in Pakistan an example of state-owned persecution. This is the vicious circle that gave way to the anti-Ahmadiyya laws and the anti-Ahmadiyya Ordinance 20 of 1984.
In the history of Pakistan, 26th of April 1984 will always be remembered, not as a day when something good was done, but as a day on which an ordinance against the Ahmadiyya Muslim community was passed and promulgated, declaring them outside the fold of Islam and making it a crime for the Muslims, Ahmadi Muslims, to declare themselves to be Muslims, to practice it, to preach it, or act upon it, or to pose in any way to be a Muslim. That was declared as a crime in Pakistan.
जनरल ज़ियाउल हक साहब ने 1984 में जमात अहमदिया के खिलाफ अप्रैल के महीने में एक ऑर्डिनेंस किया, जिसमें हमारी जमात की कई चीज़ों पे, आज़ादियों पे कदगन लगाई, कई काम करने पे कदगन लगाई कि ये काम नहीं कर सकते, और साथ ही ये भी कहा कि हम ये इस्लाहात इस्तेमाल नहीं कर सकते, और इसकी सज़ा भी रखी जो कि 3 साल और जुर्माना और या दोनों मिला के है.
It is such a ridiculous ordinance that under this ordinance, an Ahmadi who says himself a Muslim, who do any act which the other Muslim do, he can be penalized. So this is absolutely a ridiculous act. We were not, 100% sure that this proclamation will be done, but unfortunately this ordinance was promulgated, and when it was promulgated, it was difficult for the head of the Ahmadiyya community to remain in Pakistan and to convey his message to Pakistan, because under that act, if one pray, one says salat in the way other Muslims says, so it's a crime. If one say Friday sermon, and if you use Islamic terminology, it is a crime. So that was the difficulties under which all Ahmadis, they were difficult for them to perform their duties, for their religious duties as described under the Sharia law. But the Khalifa, who is the head of the organization, who has to convey his instructions and directions throughout the world, he could not convey his message even to Pakistan.
जो कवानीन बने थे उसकी रूह से तो खलीफा वक्त तो कुजा एक आम अहमदी भी अपने आप को मुसलमान नहीं कह सकता, इसलिए ज़रा सी बात से इस्लाम ज़ाहिर हो तो मुकदमा बन जाता था, और कई उसके बाद बड़े मुकदमे बने. ये वजह हुई. तो चूँकि खलीफा वक्त ने तो जमात को अहकाम सादर करने हैं, हिकमत अमली से जमात को चलाना है, तो उस सूरत में अगर खलीफा वक्त के अहकाम पर पाबंदी हो तो फिर तो इस मुल्क पे रहने की कोई गुंजाइश नहीं रहती.
The leader of the time, Hazrat Mirza Tahir Ahmad, on whom be mercy, could not function as a Khalifa in Pakistan. This test was yet to get tougher when a young lift attendant was to disappear.
Yes, about Aslam Quraishi, you see, it was a conspiracy. which was prepared by the mullahs in conjunction with the government of that period. Zia and his minister, they knew where Asraf Qureshi was. There was one day, he was not a Maulana, he was a criminal man. He was a lift operator in Islamabad, Pakistan Secretariat, and he attacked Hazrat Sabzada Mirza Muzaffar Ahmad Sahib in the lift with a weapon, and he tried to, it was with the intention of murder him. Hazrat Mirza Ahmad Sahib was active Governor General at that time. So he was basically a criminal, and he was involved in some other criminal activities also. But he went to Sialkot in a village, he became a mullah, and to create some problems for the Ahmadis, he disappeared himself. And some of the mullah, they knew where he has gone. Sometime he was in Pakistan, and then he left for Iran. And here the government of Pakistan, including their ministers also, the military dictatorship also, they made a propaganda that this Maulana, certainly this criminal became a Maulana. And they said this Maulana Asraf Qureshi was abducted from Ahmadis, and he was murdered under the orders of Hazrat Mirza Tahir Ahmad Sahib. It was so heavily propagated in Pakistan, in the media, as well as the mullah, they took up this question, that one of the mullah, he said that if Mirza Tahir Ahmad Sahib is not the murderer of this Mullah Qureshi, he has been murdered by him under his orders. And if this allegation is incorrect, then please hang me. And this statement was published in the press. Then suddenly, after a few times, and due to these allegations, the attacks were made on the Ahmadis. The properties of the Ahmadis, they were attacked, and this was the Ahmadis' life was made visible in this, especially the Sialkot area.
True followers of a true religion face tests of many types. One such test can be migration. The only way left for the supreme head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community to be able to lead the community was to migrate from Pakistan. This was not a simple decision. To migrate from a well-established headquarter and still run the normal course of functioning was something that could only be possible with divine help.
The religious communities, they always go through various situations and various phases of their life. One of them is that on occasions they have to go through this period of migration, leaving their place, moving to somewhere else. The head of the community or the leader or the prophet or the caliph, they have to move from place to place. So this is a phenomena which we always see with the religious communities. If we look at the example of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, Hazrat Nuh, he also had to migrate. Similarly, we see the migration in the period of Hazrat Ibrahim, Hazrat Ismail alayhi salam. Then we also see during the period of Hazrat Musa alayhi salam. Then we, coming closer to the period of Islam, we look at the very famous migration of Hazrat Isa alayhi salam. He was in Arabia, he was in Palestine, in that area, in the Middle East. Then from there, when his enemies put him onto the cross, he survived the death on the cross, and in order to fulfill his mission, he then decided to move towards the eastern country. It's a long story, but the gist of that is that he had to migrate from his home place in order to fulfill the mission which he did later on. And also, coming further on to the noblest example of the migration, that is of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. After very long persecution, then God Almighty blessed him with so many victories, victories after victories, and finally also the great blessing was given to him that he was able to return to Mecca, his birthplace, very peacefully, victorious, and he was really made in full charge of the day. when he entered into Mecca victorious. So this is the long history of the religions that we see. And also we see in the history of Ahmadiyyat that Ahmadiyyat was founded in Qadian by Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam. Then in 1947, the whole community, along with the Khalifatul Masih Sani, the second caliph, the community had to migrate from India to what became as Pakistan. So from Qadian they migrated, and then God Almighty blessed them with a new headquarter with the name of Rabwa. And then we see again that in 1984, when the dictator of Pakistan, General Ziaul Haq, he promulgated an ordinance, very infamous ordinance against the community, and made the life very difficult. And practically it was not possible for any head of the community to discharge his responsibilities and convey the message which he is bound to convey, peacefully living in that country. Then under divine permission, the Khalifatul Masih IV, rahimahullah ta'ala, he migrated from there. Now looking at all these migrations, one point emerges very brilliantly, and that is, wherever the migration is, always there is victory and success. Decree of God is that through this migration they are given victories after victories. And in case of this final example of the migration which I have given, one can see that the Ahmadiyya community, it spread far and wide throughout the world as a very prominent, progressive Muslim community, and God Almighty also blessed it with its own voice in the form of MTA, Muslim Television Ahmadiyya International. That is a global voice of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, which is now recognized as a very progressive, organized, dynamic Muslim community in the Muslim world. And not only in the Muslim world, but I would say throughout the world. So that is how the progress has been always attached to the concept of migration.
तो हुजूर ने खिलाफत को महफूज करने के लिए ये कदम उठाना ज़रूरी समझा, हिजरत कर चाहिए। और वैसे भी दोस्तों ने जो आखिरी एक छोटा सा बैच था हुजूर के मशवरे के लिए, तो उसमें हुजूर ने फरमाया कि अब से हिजरत तो ज़रूरी हो चुकी है, और हिजरत ना करके जमात को तरक्यात से हम रोक नहीं सकते। और आपका एक ये फिक्र था कि अगर मुझे हथकड़ियाँ पैमानी जाए तो मैं खुशी महसूस करूँगा, मैं उसमें कोई रोब में नहीं आना, कोई खौफ मुझे नहीं है। बड़े हुजूर दलेर हैं और दलेरी में ही आप भी रहे, और जो रास्ते में अल्लाह ताला ने उनको हिफाजत के सामान मुहैया फरमाए वो भी रिकॉर्ड में आ चुके हैं कि किस तरह रास्ते में ऐसे ही लोग भी मुयसर आए जो थे हकीकतन सरकारी आदमी थे, फौज के आदमी थे, लेकिन फ़कीर बने हुए थे।
But to leave Pakistan was as difficult an issue as to continue living in there. The Zia government had made all arrangements to arrest the supreme head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. This is the only cowardice that Zia could plan against the person who is led by God Almighty. But when the divine hand stretches out to help, it sees no boundaries. The fourth successor of the promised Messiah, Hazrat Mirza Tahir Ahmad, on whom be mercy, consulted some senior members of the community about the present situation. They unanimously agreed that migration was the only way out.
Keeping in view these difficulties and in view of this ordinance, Hazur has convened a mini shura in Rabwa. This mini shura was conducted. Most of the Umaras was in this shura, and the participant of this shura, they requested Hazur that in such a situation Hazur should leave Pakistan. Hazur has already a plan to visit European countries, European missions, and this plan was prepared by the Tabshir beforehand. And these members of the Shura requested Hazur that you have a plan to visit European countries. We request you to accept our humble request and you should leave the country.
As a result of this ordinance, it was difficult for the Khalifatul Masih to act as the spiritual religious leader of the community and to impart them the guidance which he is bound to do. So therefore, after consultation and finally after prayer to Allah Almighty, he decided to leave the country so that he can move to a place from where he can look after the needs and guide the whole community, which is a global community spread all over the world.
General condition of the Ahmadis was that they were worried about Hazur's health, Hazur's life and the working of the Jamaat.
वो जब आखिरी नमाज हुजूर ने इशा की पढ़ाई है ना वहाँ पर, वो बड़ा मंजर था, दिल को परेशान करने वाला भी और खुदा ताला की रहमत को याद करने वाला भी, दोनों लिहाज से बड़ा उम्दा अमल था। तो हुजूर ने फरमाया कि बैठ जाए, मैं कोई तकरीर नहीं करने वाला, मैंने सिर्फ आपको देखना है। तो ऐसा जज्बाती था कि लोग रो पड़े, जोर जोर से रोने लग पड़े। बहरहाल हुजूर जब वहाँ से अलविदा हुए हैं तो बहुत ही रात को जो मंजर था वो काबिल-ए-दीद था ईमान के लिहाज से।
Karachi, Khudamnabdi job started from Sakhar to the airport. It was our responsibility. We have sent some people who have received Hazur's Kafla from Sakhar. They escorted this Kafla and they come to Karachi, where we have made some arrangements at the airport, and it was concerted where Hazur would like to stay during that short period. We then proposed to our Amir Sahib, Hazur should stay someplace of the residence of some gentleman who is not very much known as a Jamaat office bearer. So we have selected a house, and Hazur, that house was vacated, and Hazur very kindly accepted to stay there for 1 or 2 hours. Another thing I want to mention, that when Hazur had a little rest at that house, when Hazur came down, so Hazur was having a turban, achkar and everything. So one of my colleague, he was a Naib Qaizullah and he was a military man, he came to me. He said, Hazur has come along with uniform. So is it not possible that we can request Hazur that this is not the time of uniform? And I said, no, I can't do this. It's Allah's job. Allah always safeguards Hazur, no problem. Then Hazur, so it's also, when Hazur has not left quietly or in a secret way, everybody knew, everybody has seen Hazur. Because I wanted to mention it, but because one of the Karachi paper mentioned that Ahmadis Khalifa have left quietly and secretly, to secret means. I mean, this Hazur's position was quite explicit. I want to say one thing, that we have made some planning, but in this all project, all that planning which we made, that was failed. And Allah has done His own arrangements. It's been maybe this, our planning was not, we couldn't do according to our plan. Maybe that Allah wanted to show us that this is my job, not your job.
कोई हुक्म इब्तिलाई नहीं था, ये बड़ी खुदा ताला की रहमत थी कि रास्ता बिल्कुल साफ था, कानून के लिहाज से भी और अमली लिहाज से भी, और जो इंतज़ाम किया हिकमत से किया और खुदा के फजल से वो अमली जामा पहन सका। ये ख़ास अल्लाह ताला की ताईद है और ख़ास अल्लाह ताला की रहमत है कि जो भी इंतज़ाम बना उसमें कोई बहुत लंबे चौड़े इंतज़ामात नहीं थे, सिंपल रब्बा से रवाना हुए और कराची पहुंच गए और ऑनवर्ड चले गए। ये लेकिन अल्लाह ताला ने हर मामला, जिस तरह नाम की अब गलती हो गई, वो तलाश करते रहे मिर्ज़ा नासिर अहमद को, और हुक्म भी ये था कि मिर्ज़ा नासिर अहमद को रोक लिया जाए। तो मिर्ज़ा नासिर अहमद होते तो रोके जाते। तो हुजूर का जाना ऐसा हिकमत अल्लाह ताला के फजल के पर मुनसर था, कोई रास्ते में रोक पैदा नहीं हुई, ना कानून शिकनी हुई, ना कोई और धोखाधड़ी हुई। अल्लाह ताला ने तमाम सच्चाइयों के मयार कायम रखते हुए एक अमन व अमान से हुजूर को बाहर पहुंचा।
At that time, Anwar Kalo Sahib was the Amir of UK. I received a call from Anwar Kalo Sahib late in the night, very late in the night, that there is a emergency meeting being called of Amla. And as I was member of the Amla, he said that every member should attend that meeting at Fajr time in order to discuss certain matters about the Jamaat. So I went there. I had absolutely no idea that Hazur was arriving. We went in the meeting in the morning. Anwar Kalun Sahib explained that he has received an intimation that Hazur has already left Pakistan and will be arriving very shortly in Amsterdam by KLM. So Anwar Kalo Sahib asked me, anybody who has a passport? I said, I have. He said, please immediately go to the airport and take a flight and meet Hazur in Amsterdam. So I collected the passport. I left the Amla meeting, collected the passport and went straight to the airport. This was Heathrow, and took a KLM flight because Hazur was coming back by KLM flight, and went straight to Amsterdam.
So therefore he decided, it's a long story, how miraculously he was able to come out of Pakistan without violating any command or any direction announced at that time. So he was free to travel. So he did not change his dress, in his own dress, in the same normally attire which he has. He came out of Pakistan and safely arrived in London on 30th of April 1984. That was a very historic day, momentous time when he arrived here, and on the same day he addressed the community in Mahmood Hall at the London Mosque, and in that lecture, which was delivered in Urdu and also in English, he described the background of this very severe conspiracy which was being hatched against the Ahmadiyya community. He described the background in which he had to take this decision. He gave all the details and described that a very ignoble conspiracy has been hatched against the community, and they actually wanted to arrest the Khalifatul Masih and to, God forbid, to hang him, and in that way they would try to destroy the whole institution of Khilafat, not only in Pakistan, but render the whole community without any spiritual leadership. So that was a very ill-founded and ill-conceived idea. But Allah Almighty, who is always protecting the community, He helped the Khalifatul Masih and guided him to take that decision. So he arrived here. So the Jamaat could not, the Pakistan government could not do anything at all. It is mentioned that when the then Dictator General Ziaul Haq, he came to know that Hazrat Khalifatul Masih, 4th Rahimahullah Ta'ala, Hazrat Mirza Tahir Ahmad Sahib, he is not in Pakistan and he has left. He came here. He became extremely furious, extremely upset. But the enmity that he had against the community and the opposition, that continued. Although the regulation was very strict, very difficult, it made the life of the Ahmadis in Pakistan very difficult. It was a very obnoxious type of persecution which was carried out against the community in Pakistan at that time. I just want to give you one example, that as the head of the so-called Muslim state of Pakistan, General Ziaul Haq sent a message to Khatm-e-Nubuwwat conference in 1985. The conference was held here. It is not customary that the head of the country should ever be sending messages to all the conferences. But as he was very adamant that he is going to persecute the community, and he wanted to see that this Ordinance 20 is actually enforced in letter and spirit according to his wishes, Therefore, he decided to send a message. And the ambassador of Pakistan, or the High Commissioner of Pakistan, he was forced to read out that message in that meeting of Khatm Nubuwwat held in London. In that message, the President of Pakistan, General Ziaul Haq, he mentioned, in the last few years, in particular, the government of Pakistan has taken several stringent administrative and legal measures to prevent the Qadianis from masquerading as Muslims and from practicing various Shair-e-Islami. And then he said, we will, inshallah, persevere in our effort to ensure that the cancer of Qadianism is exterminated. Just look how inappropriate is the use of the word inshallah here. He is saying, God willing, we are going to exterminate the cancer of Qadianism. While the truth of Ahmadiyyat is the will of God. Who can exterminate that? Who can destroy that? Who can finish that? Nobody can do it. So the will of God is there that the Ahmadiyyat should progress. And that was bound to happen. And that's happening. But anyway, this is the extent of the enmity of the General Zia at that time.
Then after that, he started with his work. He immediately went around and used office and worked as usual to organize the Jamaat and to look after the affairs of the Jamaat.
When we got this news that Huzur has reached London, I must say there was a wave of happiness. People were very happy. All Ahmadis were so pleased and so happy that some of the Ahmadis, I remember, they distributed sweets. Because the presence of Huzur in Pakistan, as the intentions of the government were known to everybody, that this government is going to do something to Jamaat, or maybe Huzur's may be arrested. Some of the people thought that he might be arrested, so that they can stop Khilafat's working. This was a general impression.
तो इसमें मैं एक और चीज़ बताता जाऊं कि जब ये 26 अप्रैल 1984 को आया और 28 अप्रैल को हज़रत खलीफातुल मसीह राबि रहमुल्लाह ने मशवरा करके पाकिस्तान से हिज्रत फरमाई। ये आम लोगों के जहन में उठता है कि सवाल के हजूर की ने हिजरत क्यों फरमाई जबकि बाकी अहमदी रह रहे हैं और हजूर ने हिजरत फरमा ली। उसका बड़ा बुनियादी ये है कि मकसद है कि खलीफातुल मसीह के दो बुनियादी एक काम होते हैं जो खलीफातुल मसीह करता है, एक जमात की तरबियत और दूसरे इस्लाम और अहमदियत की तबलीग। दूसरों के इस्लाम और अहमदियत की तरफ उन्हें तालीम सही तालीम से रोशनास कराते हैं और उनको इस्लाम अहमदियत की तरफ बुलाते हैं। इस कानून की रूह से खलीफातुल मसीह ना अहमदियत की तबलीग कर सकते थे, ना अहमदियत को इस्लाम की तरफ रेफर कर सकते थे जो कि उन खलीफातुल मसीह का काम है जो खुदा की तरफ से उन्हें मंसूब हुआ, ना वो इस्लाम की तबलीग कर सकते थे क्योंकि अपने आप को मुसलमान ही नहीं कह सकते थे। तो इस्लाम की तबलीग गैर मुसलमानों को कैसे तबलीग करें, और गैर अहमदियों को अहमदियत की तबलीग नहीं कर सकते थे क्योंकि कानून की कदगन थी। तो इसलिए ये था कि आपके लिए हिज्रत करना ज़रूरी हो गया था क्योंकि अब मुल्क की कानून की रूह से आप अपनी तबलीग का काम नहीं कर सकते थे, तो इसलिए आपने हिज्रत फरमाई वहां से।
The migration was an episode that was to prevail over decades to come. The headquarters of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community had to be established in London, but this proved to be a blessing in disguise. The community's first television channel was to be broadcast worldwide 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. London was to prove a great source for propagating the message of truth. After all, it is the crossroads of the world. But the persecution was not to end. It would now take on a vigorous turn, and the Ahmadis were to be tried time and time again.
ये वैसे एक बात है कि ये अचानक नहीं हुआ कि हम कहें कि एक रातों रात एक दिन हुआ और ये ऑर्डिनेंस हो गया। इसका एक पस मंजर है जो कि पस मंजर पाकिस्तान की तारीख में चला आ रहा है। जैसे कि 1974 में पहले कौमी असम्बली के जरिए हमें नॉन मुस्लिम डिक्लेयर किया गया, जिसकी पहले मुल्की कानून पाकिस्तान के कानून में भी और बैनुल अक़वामी कानून में भी कोई मिसाल मौजूद नहीं थी कि किसी मजहब की तारीफ एक दुनियावी असम्बली करे। हाँ, मौलवी करते थे कि ये हमारे फिरके में शामिल नहीं है, ये वो नहीं है, लेकिन मुल्की कानून में ये चीज़ कभी शामिल नहीं की गई थी कि ये बंदा ईसाई है, ये मुसलमान है या ये गैर मुस्लिम है वगैरह वगैरह। लेकिन 1974 में की गई और उसके तसलसल में अगली हुकूमत जो आई जनरल ज़िया की, उन्होंने इसमें हमारे कुछ आज़ादियों पे कदगन लगाई और उसे एक जुर्म करार दे दिया गया और ताज़ीरात पाकिस्तान में भी शामिल किया गया। उसमें मिसाल के तौर पे हम पे जो लगी कि हम ये अल्फाज इस्तेमाल नहीं कर सकते कि अपने खलीफतुल मसीह को हम खलीफतुल मुस्लिमीन अमीरुल मोमिनीन नहीं लिख सकते और कह नहीं सकते, ये थी। और दूसरा ये कि हम आप खलीफतुल मुस्लिमीन भी नहीं लिख सकते सिवाय रसूलुल्लाह सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के सहाबा के, और किसी आदमी को सहाबी नहीं कह सकते और रज़ियल्लाहु अन्हु नहीं कह सकते, और हज़रत सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के अहले बैत के अलावा किसी को अहले बैत नहीं कह सकते, और रसूलुल्लाह सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम की अज़वाज मुतहहरात के अलावा किसी को उम्मुल मोमिनीन नहीं कह सकते। ये तो थी इस्तिलाहात के मुतालिक कि ये इस्तिलाहात हम इस्तेमाल नहीं कर सकते। अगर किसी अहमदी ने की किसी के बारे में तो उसे ये 3 साल या जुर्माना या दोनों सजाएं होंगी। और इसमें अजीब बात यह है कि इसमें सिर्फ अहमदियों को मखसूस किया गया है, ईसाई, यहूदी, पारसी, हिंदू और किसी को नहीं डाला गया कि कोई गैर मुस्लिम, ये नहीं कहा गया कि कोई गैर मुस्लिम नहीं कर सकता। किया यह गया, कानून ये बनाया गया कि कोई अहमदी नहीं कर सकता, और अपनी इबादतगाह को हम बैतुल मस्जिद नहीं कह सकते, ये भी एक पाबंदी थी हमारे पे। तो जो ये करेगा उसे ये उसकी सजा 3 साल तक और जुर्माना होगी।
The recruitments, promotions, postings, there was total discrimination for Ahmadis. There was no merit actually in the government. Armed forces, Navy, Air Force, colleges, schools, they will not allow Ahmadi children to enter. If you go through that portion, that time period, you will see that very few Ahmadi officers entered into any such organization जो गवर्नमेंट के साथ जिनका ताल्लुक।
जो दूसरा था जो कि हमारे अमलन मजहब की पैरवी में, मजहब की आज़ादी में ज़्यादा रुकावट डाल रहा था कि हमारे जो प्रैक्टिकल वो हैं उस पर ज़्यादा रुकावट डाल रहा था, वो था जो कि वो ये था कि अहमदी अपने आप को ना डायरेक्टली ना इनडायरेक्टली मुसलमान नहीं कह सकते, और अपने मजहब को इस्लाम की तरफ हम रेफर नहीं कर सकते कि ये इस्लाम का मजहब है, और हम अपने मजहब की, अपने फिरके की और अपने मजहब की तबलीग नहीं कर सकते, और किसी को अहमदी होने की दावत नहीं दे सकते। चाहे हम ये जुबानी भी नहीं कर सकते, लिख कर भी नहीं कर सकते, और इसी तरह विजिबल रिप्रेजेंटेशन में भी नहीं कर सकते, और किसी और लिहाज से भी हम कोई ऐसा फेल नहीं कर सकते जिससे मुसलमानों के जज्बात मजरूह हों। अगर करेंगे तो हमें 3 साल सजा और जुर्माना, 3 साल तक सजा और जुर्माना या दोनों होंगे।
Suddenly, out of nowhere appeared a man, the same man whose disappearance was once the most important issue for the government of Pakistan.
After some time, they were constantly saying that Nauzubillah, Hazrat Mirza Tahir Ahmad Sahib is the murderer, and he hatched the conspiracy to kill Aslam Qureshi, otherwise where is he? And then suddenly Mirza Aslam Qureshi surfaced in Pakistan. All this time he was in Iran, and he, under Ahrar instruction and under Ahrar protection, he was asked not to open his mouth. But he got fed up with the whole thing. After for how long he could, so he came out and he said he gave a press conference and told that no, Ahmadis have done nothing to me. I went to Iran and I was working there.
Hazrat Mirza Tahir Ahmad began to warn Zia of his ways more and more. Zia paid no attention and continued this hobby. He was ignorant of the fact that this hobby was like playing with fire.
जमात अहमदिया तो खुदा ताला के फजल से एक वाली रखती है, एक वली रखती है। जमात अहमदिया का एक मौला है और जमीन और आसमान का खुदा हमारा मौला है। लेकिन मैं तुम्हें बताता हूं कि तुम्हारा कोई मौला नहीं है। खुदा की कसम, जब हमारा मौला हमारी मदद को आएगा तो कोई तुम्हारी मदद नहीं कर सकेगा। खुदा की तकदीर जब तुम्हें टुकड़े टुकड़े करेगी तो तुम्हारे नामो निशान मिटा दिए जाएंगे और हमेशा दुनिया तुम्हें जिल्लत और रुसवाई के साथ याद करेगी।
है तेरे पास क्या गालियों।
Later on 10th of June, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Rabi rahimahullah ta'ala, after a profound prayers to Allah Almighty and seeking His guidance, then he announced the challenge of Mubahala. That was an invitation to come together and pray against one another. Whosoever is wrong, God Almighty should see to that and punish that person. And those who are that group who is right, God Almighty should make that group victorious and give him all the help. So that was the Mubahala challenge, which was thrown to the leaders of the so-called Muslim community all over the world, that whosoever is ready, they should come forward, sign the document and accept the challenge as such. It's very interesting that in that announcement of 10th of June 1988, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih particularly mentioned General Ziaul Haq by name, because he was the mastermind of the ignoble ordinance, and he also wanted to see that it's put into practice in the best possible manner. So therefore, Huzur chose him as one leader who was the person really behind the whole ordinance, and invited him that you should also accept this challenge and then see what God Almighty does. But he did not have the courage to accept that. He did not respond to this one. Then Hazrat Khalifatul Masih took up the subject again in one of the sermon, and he declared very openly that whether Ziaul Haq is going to accept this challenge or not, whether he is going to sign the document or not, but if he continues to persist in his persecution of the Ahmadiyya community, that would be taken tantamount to his acceptance of the challenge. So after that, on 12th of August 1988, in one of the sermon, I remember very vividly, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih mentioned one of his dream. And he mentioned that I have seen that the grinding mill of the wrath of God, that has started moving. And he mentioned specifically that despite the fact that the President Ziaul Haq has not accepted the challenge in so many words, but now he cannot escape the wrath of God. And he is going to be crushed into this one. That was a very emphatic, very clear statement which he gave. And look at the doings of Allah Almighty. Only few days after that, on 17th August 1988, General Ziaul Haq was killed in a plane crash.
All 31 people on board the C-130 had died instantly, or quite possibly before. The cause of the death was unknown, as it is unknown today, but the reason for why it happened is known worldwide. Although apparently the persecution had decreased, but the community continued to face pain and anguish when news of the violent extremism against Ahmadis was heard. Zia had met his fate, but with it he had left an evil legacy that would now lurk the streets of Pakistan. Then in 1998, the persecution of Ahmadis in Pakistan took a new and very strange turn. Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, who was then the executive director of the main administrative body of the community, became a direct target of this persecution.
In 1998, a resolution was passed in the Provincial Assembly of Pakistan at the behest of the clergy or the mullahs in Pakistan, and that was a very vicious proposal. The resolution was passed that the name of the city, which is the headquarters of the Ahmadiyya movement in Islam throughout the world, in Pakistan, that is called Rabwa, the name of that city should be changed. Obviously, it is very strange that a city which was populated and established by the Ahmadiyya Jamaat, and the population of which is almost entirely based on Ahmadi people, the name of that city should be changed without their suggestion, without their approval, or even without any reference to them. But at that time, even their anguish was not satisfied. They thought we should do something more than that. So at that point, a ceremony was held in Rabwa, where the signboard of the new name given forcibly to this town, that was written on the signboard, and the unveiling ceremony was conducted in Rabwa. They invited some senior members of the government. 2 of them they refused. 1 came and they performed the ceremony. Still there was no reaction from that. After that they thought of another plan, and they employed some people, the mullahs and the other people working with them. They employed certain people to put paint on that signboard and to efface the title and the writing of the verses of the Holy Quran, which they included in that signboard. And after that, a totally fabricated and concocted litigation was brought against very senior members of the community. And by that I mean Sahibzada Mirza Masroor Ahmad Sahib, who was the Amir-e-Muqami, the local president, and also who was the Nazir-e-Ala, the chief secretary of Sadr Ahmadiyya, and the local president of the community in Rabwa, and 2 other people. Against these 4 people, a litigation was brought in the local court, and the proceedings started. And after several proceedings, finally, on 30th of April in 1999, the final request for the bail in this case was rejected in Chiniot, the Tahsil near Rabwa. And after that, these 4 people, they were asked to come out of the court. While the bail has been refused, then the immediate result was that they should be arrested. And after that, they were asked to get onto a police van, and they traveled towards Chang, the district headquarters, where they were going to be put into the jail. So that journey was carried out, and finally they arrived in Chang, and there they were admitted into the cell. They did not moan about that, they did not complain about that. Rather, they spent most of their time in their worship, in their prayers, meditation of Allah, reciting the Holy Quran and reciting other religious books. And the head of this delegation, Sahibzada Mirza Masroor Ahmad Sahib, he was a source of inspiration and encouragement for his other companions. But these days and nights, with all those terrible conditions in the typical Pakistani jails, that was really horrible. It was really very, very miserable time through which they were subjected to go. And after 10 days, on 10th of May 1999, finally, by the grace of Allah, the announcement about their release was there. So this is how Sahibzada Mirza Masroor Ahmad Sahib, the Amir-e-Muqami and the Nazir-e-Ala of Sadr Ahmadiyya Pakistan, was subjected to this arrest. But in a way, he was very fortunate that he also followed in the footsteps of Hazrat Yusuf alayhi salam, who was also put into prison.
This was a clear indication that the hostile mullahs knew no limits when it came to the persecution of innocent Ahmadis. Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, may Allah strengthen his hand, was later elected to the exalted office of Khalifatul Masih, 5th successor of the promised Messiah, on whom be peace. The 4th successor of the promised Messiah, Hazrat Mirza Tahir Ahmad, on whom be mercy, passed away on the 19th of April 2003 in England, never to see his beloved land again. The evil legacy of President Zia means that the head of the community can never return to his homeland. Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, may Allah strengthen his hand, arrived in London on the 20th of April 2003 for the election of the 5th Khalifa. On the 22nd of April 2003, at 11:40 p.m. in the Fazl Mosque, Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad was elected as the 5th successor of the promised Messiah. He had with this inherited the sacrifice which his predecessor, Hazrat Mirza Tahir Ahmad, on whom be mercy, had to give. But this sacrifice has never held the community back. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community continues to stride leaps and bounds day by day.
गुज़रे हुए 100 साल की तारीख गवाह है, गुज़रे हुए 100 साल की तारीख गवाह है, साए की तरह साया फिगन हम पे खुदा है, हम पे खुदा है, हम पे खुदा है।